Michael Torres was restocking the holiday display when he heard the distinctive sound of tactical radio chatter coming from the men browsing the electronics aisle. His military training kicked in immediately. That wasn't mall security communication. It was something much more dangerous. The former Army sergeant turned retail manager realized he was watching a terrorist attack in its final preparation phase. The men planning to turn Black Friday shopping into a massacre had no idea they were being watched by a veteran who had spent 12 years preventing exactly these kinds of attacks in combat zones. Welcome to Real Security Stories, where we uncover the moments when civilian life collides with military expertise in the most unexpected ways. Before we dive into this incredible story of holiday shopping, hidden threats and the thin line between peace and terror, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe that some training never leaves you, no matter how far you are from the battlefield, hit that subscribe button. These stories save lives. Michael Torres hung up his Army uniform for the last time on a rainy Thursday in September, 3 years ago. After 12 years of service, including 3 deployments to Afghanistan and 2 to Iraq, he was ready to trade the chaos of military life for something quieter, more predictable. The transition from Staff Sergeant Torres to civilian Michael had been harder than he'd expected, but the job as assistant manager at TechWorld Electronics had given him purpose and stability. TechWorld was one of the anchor stores in Riverside Mall, a sprawling shopping center that served 3 counties in suburban Ohio. The store specialized in consumer electronics, from smartphones to gaming systems, and it attracted a steady stream of customers who ranged from tech enthusiasts to families looking for the latest gadgets. Michael had been promoted to assistant manager after just 18 months, his military discipline and leadership skills making him a natural fit for retail management. What his coworkers didn't know was that Michael's military service had been far from ordinary. As a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment, he had specialized in counterterrorism operations, urban warfare, and threat assessment. His deployments had taken him to some of the most dangerous places on Earth, where he had learned to identify and neutralize terrorist threats before they could harm innocent people. The skills that had kept him alive in Kandahar and Fallujah had seemed irrelevant in the brightly lit aisles of an electronics store. Until today. Black Friday was still 3 days away, but Riverside Mall was already bustling with early holiday shoppers taking advantage of pre-Black Friday sales. Michael had arrived at TechWorld at 6 a.m. to prepare for what promised to be one of the busiest shopping days of the year. The store was offering significant discounts on popular items, and the marketing team had been pushing the sales heavily on social media and local advertising. Michael was restocking the holiday display near the front of the store when he first noticed them. 3 men in their late 20s, dressed in dark clothing that was slightly too heavy for the mild November weather. They had been in the electronics section for the past hour, but they weren't shopping in the typical sense. They were moving with a purpose that Michael recognized immediately from his military training. The first man was positioned near the store's main entrance, ostensibly examining tablet computers but actually monitoring the foot traffic and timing the security patrols. The second was in the gaming section, appearing to compare console prices while actually surveying the store's layout and identifying potential escape routes. The third was near the customer service desk, pretending to read product specifications while observing the store's staff and their routines. Michael's training in threat assessment kicked in automatically. His breathing slowed, his awareness heightened, and his mind began cataloging details with the precision of someone who had spent years in combat zones. These weren't casual shoppers or even professional thieves. They were conducting reconnaissance with military precision. What confirmed Michael's suspicions was the sound he heard as he moved closer to the electronics section. The distinctive crackle of tactical radio communication, not the clear professional tones of mall security, but the coded urgent whispers of people coordinating a covert operation. "Bravo! Status report," came the barely audible transmission from the earpiece of the man near the gaming section. "Clear on approach routes. 2-minute intervals on security sweeps," was the response from the man at the entrance. Michael's blood ran cold. After 12 years of military service, he knew tactical communication when he heard it. This wasn't a robbery or a simple criminal activity. This was something much more dangerous, and it was happening in his store, on his watch, with hundreds of innocent shoppers as potential victims. The timing was perfect from a terrorist's perspective. The day before Black Friday, the mall was crowded but not yet at peak capacity. Security was focused on shoplifting prevention rather than major threats. The media attention from a successful attack would be enormous, sending shockwaves through the retail industry and the American psyche during the most important shopping season of the year. Michael forced himself to continue restocking the display, but his mind was now fully engaged in threat assessment mode. He began to notice details that would have been invisible to civilian observers, but were glaringly obvious to someone with his background. The three men were operating in a classic terrorist cell formation, with each member responsible for a specific aspect of the operation. The man at the entrance was handling perimeter security and early warning. The one in the gaming section was conducting detailed reconnaissance of the store's layout and identifying optimal positions for maximum impact. The third, near customer service, was timing staff movements and identifying key personnel who might need to be neutralized first. Michael also noticed that all three men were carrying backpacks that appeared unusually heavy for casual shoppers. The way they moved, the careful positioning of the bags, and the fact that they never set them down suggested they contained something more dangerous than personal belonging. The communication between the three men was becoming more frequent and more urgent. Michael could hear fragments of their radio chatter as he moved through the store. Package placement confirmed for maximum coverage. Primary target identified. Secondary positions marked. Timeline acceleration. Implement on my signal. Michael's military training told him that whatever these men were planning, it was moving into its final phase. He estimated that he had perhaps 15 minutes before the attack began, and he was the only person in the store who understood the true nature of the threat. Michael's first instinct was to call mall security or the police, but he knew that traditional law enforcement response would be too slow and potentially catastrophic. By the time police arrived and assessed the situation, the attack would be over. Hundreds of people could be dead or injured, and the terrorist would likely have achieved their goal of maximum casualties and media impact. His second instinct was to try to evacuate the store, but any obvious evacuation would immediately alert the terrorists and likely trigger the attack before people could escape. Michael needed to find a way to neutralize the threat without causing panic or escalating the situation. What Michael did have was intimate knowledge of the store's layout, its security systems, and its personnel. He also had 12 years of experience in exactly this type of situation. Asymmetric warfare in urban environments where distinguishing between combatants and civilians was a matter of life and death. Michael made a decision that would have been impossible for anyone without his specific training and experience. He was going to stop the attack himself, using the store as his battlefield and his retail colleagues as his tactical team. Michael's first move was to quietly alert his staff without revealing the true nature of the threat. He couldn't risk causing panic, but he needed to position his team for what was about to happen. "Sarah," he said quietly to his assistant, "I need you to make an announcement about a special promotion in the back of the store, something that will draw customers away from the front sections." Sarah looked confused. "But we don't have any special promotions running right now." "We do now," Michael said, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded respect in combat zones. "Tell people we're offering an additional 20% off all gaming accessories, but only for the next 10 minutes and only in the back section." While Sarah made the announcement, Michael moved to the next phase of his plan. He approached his security coordinator, a former police officer named Jim Patterson, who had been hired specifically for the holiday season. "Jim, I need you to do something for me without asking questions," Michael said. "I need you to position yourself near the fire alarm system and be ready to activate it on my signal." Jim looked at Michael with concern. "Is everything okay?" "Everything will be fine if you trust me and do exactly what I say," Michael replied. "Also, I need you to call mall security and tell them to quietly position themselves at all the major entrances. No sirens, no obvious response, just extra personnel." Michael knew that he was asking his staff to trust him with their lives, but he also knew that he was their only hope of surviving what was about to happen. Michael's plan was based on the principles of asymmetric warfare that he had learned in Iraq and Afghanistan. He couldn't match the terrorists' firepower or their willingness to cause mass casualties, but he could use their own tactics against them and exploit their assumptions about American civilian response. The terrorists expected panic, confusion, and helplessness. They expected security forces to be slow and ineffective. They expected to have complete control of the situation from the moment they initiated their attack. Michael was about to prove them wrong. His first move was to use the store's public address system to make an announcement that would sound routine to customers, but would be unmistakable to anyone with tactical training. "Attention shoppers, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our security system. Please remain calm while we resolve the issue. Store management is handling the situation." The announcement served multiple purposes. It alerted mall security that something was wrong without specifying the nature of the threat. It gave Michael a reason to move freely through the store without appearing suspicious. Most importantly, it was the kind of coded communication that would make the terrorists believe they had been discovered, forcing them to either abort their mission or accelerate their timeline. Michael watched as the three men reacted to his announcement. Their radio chatter increased immediately, and their movements became more urgent. They were moving into attack position. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Michael had spent 12 years learning to fight exactly this kind of urban warfare, and he was about to apply every lesson he had learned. The terrorist near the entrance was the first to make his move. Reaching into his backpack and beginning to assemble what appeared to be an improvised explosive device. Michael's response was immediate and decisive. Using his knowledge of the store's layout, Michael approached the terrorist from a blind angle, moving behind displays and using customers as cover. His movement was so smooth and natural that other shoppers didn't even notice him until he was already in position. "Security!" Michael shouted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded troops in combat. "Everyone get down!" The terrorist spun around, surprised by the sudden confrontation. But Michael was already moving. 12 years of close-quarters combat training had taught him exactly how to neutralize an armed opponent in a crowded environment. The terrorist's weapon clattered to the floor as Michael's training took over. The man was subdued within seconds, his explosive device secured, and his radio destroyed. But Michael knew that the other two terrorists would react immediately to the loss of their teammate. The second terrorist, positioned in the gaming section, began shouting instructions to his remaining partner while reaching for his own explosive device. Michael's response was swift and coordinated. "Jim, fire alarm now!" Michael shouted. The piercing sound of the fire alarm filled the store, providing cover for Michael's movements while also giving customers a clear signal to evacuate. The terrorist advantage of surprise was gone, replaced by confusion and noise that favored Michael's military training. Michael moved through the store with the fluid efficiency of someone who had spent years in urban combat. He used displays as cover, customers as shields, and his intimate knowledge of the store's layout to stay one step ahead of the terrorists. The second terrorist was attempting to position his device for maximum casualties when Michael reached him. The confrontation was brief but intense, with Michael's military training overwhelming the terrorist's preparation and desperation. With two terrorists neutralized, Michael turned his attention to the third, who was now trapped in the customer service area with nowhere to retreat. The remaining terrorist had barricaded himself behind the customer service counter, his explosive device armed and ready. Michael could see the desperation in the man's eyes, the realization that his carefully planned attack had been completely disrupted by someone he had never anticipated. "It's over," Michael said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Your team is down, mall security is surrounding the building, and you have no escape route. Put the device down and surrender." The terrorist shouted something in a language Michael didn't recognize, but his body language was clear. He was preparing to detonate his device, even if it meant killing himself and anyone else in the immediate area. Michael's training told him that this was the most dangerous moment of the entire confrontation. Cornered terrorists were unpredictable, and their desperation made them capable of anything. But Michael had been in this situation before, in places where the stakes were even higher and the consequences of failure were measured in the lives of his fellow soldiers. What Michael did next was the result of 12 years of experience in situations where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. He moved with the confidence of someone who had faced similar threats hundreds of times, using techniques that had been tested in the most dangerous places on Earth. The terrorist device was neutralized, the man was subdued, and the immediate threat was over. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it had prevented what could have been one of the deadliest terrorist attacks on American soil. Mall security arrived to find the 3 terrorists in custody, their weapons secured, and their explosive devices safely neutralized. The store was evacuated without any casualties, and the broader mall was cleared as a precautionary measure. Michael stood in the middle of his store, surrounded by the displays he had been restocking just minutes earlier, trying to process what had just happened. For 12 years he had been a soldier fighting terrorism in foreign countries. Today he had been a retail manager protecting American shoppers from the same threat. The investigation that followed revealed that the 3 terrorists had been part of a larger cell that had been planning coordinated attacks on multiple shopping centers across the Midwest. Their goal had been to cause mass casualties during the holiday shopping season, creating fear and economic disruption that would resonate throughout American society. Michael's intervention had not only prevented the attack on Riverside Mall, but had also provided intelligence that led to the arrest of the entire terrorist network. His military training and tactical expertise had been the difference between a successful terror attack and a prevented tragedy. The FBI investigation showed that the terrorists had spent months planning their attack. They had studied the mall's layout, its security procedures, and its busiest shopping time. They had acquired sophisticated explosive devices and had coordinated their timing to maximize casualties and media impact. What they hadn't planned for was encountering Michael Torres, a former Army Ranger who had spent 12 years fighting exactly their kind of asymmetric warfare. The media attention that followed was intense, but carefully managed. Michael was praised as a hero by law enforcement officials, military leaders, and government officials. His actions were analyzed by terrorism experts and used as a case study in civilian counterterrorism response. But Michael was uncomfortable with the attention. He had simply done what his training had prepared him to do, and he was more concerned with getting back to his normal life than with being celebrated as a hero. "I was just doing my job," he told reporters. "I saw a threat to innocent people, and I responded the way I was trained to respond. Any veteran with my background would have done the same thing." The broader implications of Michael's actions were significant. His success in preventing the attack demonstrated that military veterans in civilian roles could be valuable assets in homeland security. His ability to recognize and respond to terrorist threats in a retail environment showed that the skills learned in combat zones were directly applicable to protecting American communities. The incident at Riverside Mall led to significant changes in how shopping centers approach security. Michael's recommendations for improved threat assessment, staff training, and emergency response procedures were implemented not just at his mall, but at retail locations across the country. Michael was offered numerous positions with federal law enforcement agencies, private security firms, and military contractors. The skills he had demonstrated in preventing the terrorist attack were clearly valuable in the broader security industry. But Michael chose to remain at TechWorld Electronics, accepting a promotion to store manager and taking on additional responsibilities for security training and threat assessment. He had found his calling in protecting ordinary Americans in their daily lives, and he was determined to continue that mission. 6 months after the incident, Michael developed a training program for retail employees that focused on threat recognition, emergency response, and customer safety. The program was based on his military experience, but adapted for civilian environments and personnel. Most terrorist attacks succeed because people don't recognize the threat until it's too late, Michael explained to his trainee. But terrorists follow predictable patterns, and those patterns can be identified by anyone who knows what to look for. The training covered everything from recognizing suspicious behavior, to coordinating with law enforcement, to managing evacuations without causing panic. Michael's approach was practical and accessible, designed to give civilian employees the tools they needed to protect themselves and their customers. The program was so successful that it was adopted by retail chains across the country. Michael became a consultant for the National Retail Federation, helping to develop security protocols that could be implemented in shopping centers, department stores, and other civilian targets. Today, Michael Torres continues to work as a store manager at TechWorld Electronics, but his role has evolved far beyond retail management. He has become a bridge between the military and civilian worlds, using his combat experience to protect American communities from terrorist threat. He regularly speaks at military transition seminars, helping other veterans understand how their skills can be applied in civilian career. He has also become an advocate for recognizing the value of military training in homeland security. arguing that veterans in civilian roles are one of America's most underutilized security assets. People think that military training is only useful in military contexts, Michael says. But the skills we learn in combat, threat assessment, tactical thinking, leadership under pressure, these are exactly the skills that civilians need to protect themselves from terrorism. Michael's story has inspired other veterans to pursue careers in retail, hospitality, and other civilian industries where they can use their military training to protect ordinary Americans. His example has shown that the war on terror doesn't end when soldiers hang up their uniforms. It continues wherever veterans choose to serve their communities. 3 years after the prevented attack, Michael still arrives at work each morning with the same alertness and attention to detail that kept him alive in Afghanistan. The skills that once protected his fellow soldiers now protect holiday shoppers, and the mission that once took him to foreign battlefields now unfolds in the familiar aisles of an electronics store. The threat of terrorism hasn't disappeared, and Michael knows that his vigilance is still needed. Every busy shopping day brings new challenges, new potential threats, and new opportunities to apply the lessons learned in combat zones to the protection of civilian communities. Michael's coworkers have learned to trust his instincts completely. When he suggests changes to store procedures or expresses concern about suspicious behavior, they listen. They know that his military training provides a level of security expertise that can't be taught in corporate training programs. The customers who shop at Tech World Electronics have no idea that their safety is being protected by someone who once fought terrorists in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. They see a friendly, professional store manager who helps them find the right electronics for their needs. They don't see the tactical awareness, the threat assessment, or the combat-tested skills that are always active beneath the surface. Michael's prevention of the Riverside Mall attack has become a case study in Homeland Security training programs. His actions are analyzed in military academies, law enforcement training centers, and security industry conferences. His approach to civilian counterterrorism has influenced policy at the federal level and has changed how retail security is approached across the country. But for Michael, the most important legacy is simpler. He has shown that military service doesn't end with discharge, and that the skills learned in combat can be used to protect American communities long after the uniform is hung up. Every veteran has something to contribute to Homeland Security, Michael says. We just need to recognize that the battlefield has changed, but the mission remains the same: protecting innocent people from those who would do them harm. The 3 terrorists who planned to turn Black Friday shopping into a massacre are serving life sentences in federal prison. Their network was dismantled, their plans were disrupted, and their message of fear was replaced by a story of vigilance and heroism. Michael Torres goes to work each day, knowing that his military training continues to serve his country. Even in the peaceful aisles of an electronics store, he has proven that some battles are won not with weapons and explosives, but with awareness, training, and the courage to act when ordinary citizens are threatened. The war on terror continues, fought by veterans who have found new ways to serve, new missions to complete, and new communities to protect. Michael's story is just one example of how military training can be transformed into civilian service, how combat experience can become community protection, and how the skills learned in foreign wars can be used to win the peace at home. As Michael locks up Tech World Electronics at the end of another busy day, he reflects on how different his life has become since leaving the military. The transition from soldier to civilian has been complete, but the mission has never really ended. Tomorrow will bring new customers, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve. The holiday shopping season is approaching, and Michael knows that his vigilance will be more important than ever. But he also knows that he's ready for whatever comes, because some training never leaves you, and some missions never end. The shoppers who visit Riverside Mall tomorrow will be protected by someone who learned to fight terrorism in the mountains of Afghanistan and the streets of Iraq. They'll be served by a store manager who can help them find the perfect electronic device while simultaneously maintaining the tactical awareness that once kept soldiers alive in combat zones. Michael Torres has found his place in the civilian world, but he has never forgotten his military mission. He has simply found a new way to serve his country, one customer at a time, one day at a time, one prevented attack at a time. Sometimes the most dangerous threats are stopped by the most unlikely heroes. Michael Torres' story reminds us that military training doesn't end with discharge, and that veterans continue to serve their communities long after the uniform comes off. If this story moved you, subscribe to Real Security Stories for more accounts of hidden heroes whose past experiences prepare them for unexpected moments of crisis. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever met a veteran whose military training helped them in civilian life? Share their story in the comments below.